Okay, I think we can get started. Good evening. I'm very happy to see all of you over here with us today. What I'm going to do today, I want to start from talking about where are we in this war, what, trying to summarize what happened just until now, a little bit of taking all the information that was published and, bringing everything to you in the various fronts and the way we see it. And then we'll go to the Q&A and we'll give some room for interpretation and analysis according to your questions and the things you want to know. So I think that the first thing we should talk about is the goals of this war. They were published by the State of Israel. And if I want to talk about all of them, the first one is to eliminate completely Hamas and the capabilities of Hamas, the military capabilities, the political capabilities of Hamas. The second goal is to remove all the threats from Gaza, coming from Gaza. The people that are living next to Gaza Strip will not be intimidated anymore. Another goal is with regard to the Northern Arena, and we'll talk about it in details later, is deterring anybody who is out there in the Northern Arena, whether it's Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, Hamas, or others, from further escalation over here, and trying to stabilize the situation in the West Bank and in Israel as well. Meaning that what IDF is actually saying and what the political level of Israel is actually saying, we prioritize the South. We are now focusing on Gaza. And all the rest is just management, and we'll deal with that later on. Another goal is, of course, bringing back the hostages. Today's headline is that there was one hostage that was released by an IDF operation inside Gaza, a ground operation inside Gaza. This happened last night, and it was just published this evening in Israel. So actually on Friday afternoon, Friday night, last Friday, IDF started the ground operation in Gaza. I specifically don't say invasion, even though we do speak on large numbers of forces that entered into Gaza, around thousands of soldiers. We don't know the exact numbers. We can say that these are forces of infantry, artillery, armor, and engineering. These forces are fighting against terrorists, and IDF today described how this is happening. What IDF is trying to do is to create killing areas to the terrorists, meaning pushing the terrorists by the ground forces into a specific area and then attacking the terrorists also from the air. That way, about 20 terrorists were killed last night. And this is enabling the IDF to move forward step by step, gradually. And I think also with securing as much as possible this ground operation. All of us understand the challenges of this ground operation when we speak about explosive, when we speak about mines, when we speak about tunnels. Hamas was waiting for us. There is no doubt about that. Hamas was fully prepared for a ground invasion, and that's why IDF is working this way, which is a little bit different from what everybody expected, but until now, it looks good. It looks successful. Since the war started, not including since the IDF operations in Gaza started, okay? We are talking about around 60 Hamas commanders that were killed by the IDF, yet the senior leadership of Hamas is still hiding, probably under the central hospital in northern Gaza, which is Shifa Hospital. They're hiding below it. IDF published all of the details on this hospital, which is located around 11 kilometers from the northern part of the Gaza Strip, about 6 kilometers if you come from the east, and around 600 meters from the seashore. And if we go for the numbers, we're talking on the Israeli side of 311 soldiers that were killed out of 1,400 Israelis in total, meaning that most of the Israelis that were killed in this war are civilians. Families of 239 hostages received an official notice that their loved ones are hostages, including around 40 foreign workers in Israel. By the way, one of them is from our town here, from Kfar Vradim. We don't know how many people are still missing. There are different numbers in the Israeli media. The numbers are between 50 to 100. People that not all the bodies were identified. There were areas where bodies were completely burned and was hardly something left. So to rebuild the DNA and to understand exactly whose ashes is this, it's a process that takes a long time. Numbers of rockets. 7,500 rockets were launched from Gaza since all of that started. This is the number where the IDF stopped, meaning the number is higher. But IDF at some point stopped publishing the numbers, the exact numbers. So it's probably higher than that. So at least 7,500 were launched to various ranges, including Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and even a few times to the lower Galilee, Haifa area, etc. A little bit less than 10% of these launchings landed in Gaza itself. El Ali Hospital is an example. You all heard the whole story. By the way, it's not exactly fell in the hospital. It fell in a parking lot in the hospital. But that's a high percentage of launchings that actually hit inside Gaza, killing Gazans. In Israel, there are around 250,000 Israelis that are displaced. 60,000 of these are from the north. IDF evacuated 0 to 5 kilometers, the communities up north, dozens of communities. These families are divided almost equally between the hotels inside the community, meaning hosting families, or that evacuated independently to their relatives and things of the sort. A lot was dedicated in the international media to the humanitarian situation in Gaza. And I want to say a few things about that. The idea of the IDF operation in Gaza is to divide Gaza to the area where the fighting is now, which is northern Gaza, and to southern Gaza, where over there it is actually a humanitarian area, and the population of Gaza was called by the IDF to evacuate to the southern part of Gaza. What I've just said, it's right for now, okay? You're probably now asking yourself whether Hamas may use this, may launch from there, may with the tunnels go below the ground and get there. All these ideas probably can be true, but this is the focus now. The understanding is that there is strategic assets of Hamas in the northern part of Gaza, and that's why this is where IDF started the operation with. I hope that Hamas will not take advantage of that, but of course nobody can promise that. There is a lot of pressure on the state of Israel to enter humanitarian aid into Gaza, not from Israel. The humanitarian aid that is coming into Gaza is coming through Rafiah border crossing. Finally, the Egyptians are enabling that, and Israel also enabling that, meaning that Israel is not bombing the roads or the area of Rafiah border crossing. For example, today, it was around a little bit more than 30 trucks that entered through Rafiah border crossing. And the idea is to get to around 100 trucks every day. Do I like it? I'm not sure that I like it, especially not when the hostages are not getting humanitarian aid and they cannot meet Red Cross, and we have zero information whether they are alive or dead. We cannot transfer any of this humanitarian aid to the hostages. Just to compare, before the war, every day, 500 trucks of humanitarian aid entered Gaza from the Israeli border crossings. 500 trucks and tens of thousands of workers from Gaza came to work in Israel in these border crossings that actually Hamas destroyed at the first day of the war on October 7th. Fuel, a lot of discussions about the fuel. IDF published that Hamas itself is holding 500,000 liters of fuel inside Gaza that the civilians have no approach to. It's in the hands of Hamas. Casualties in Gaza. The Hamas is publishing that there are 8,000 casualties in Gaza. I have a lot of questions around that, which I want to share with you. I don't know whether this number includes the 1,500 Hamas terrorists that invaded into Israel and were killed by our forces inside Israel. I don't know how this number is divided between civilians and Hamas terrorists inside Gaza. I don't know whether this number is correct. Look, in Israel, since October 7, it's been almost 4 weeks, and we don't know how many people exactly were killed. So how the Gazians can know how many people exactly were killed? And one more thing, we see a lot of fake news around it. We see videos that it's like a line of bodies, and all of a sudden one of them is moving. We see videos that somebody who is carried as dead is holding his cell phone and talking on the phone. We see that you see a body of a baby, but actually it's a doll. It's not a real person. We see using of photos from Gaza of children that are being brought out of the debris, but actually the girl is a girl that was rescued from the debris and the war in Syria. So there is a lot of fake news around that, and it's something that all of us should remember. And usually it takes time to understand in Gaza itself, and definitely outside of Gaza, how many people truly were killed in this operation. And of course, it's important also to bear in mind that Israel called the Gazians to evacuate while Hamas blocked their way. I want to move forward from Gaza, and I want to move to other areas. Because as I've said, when all of that started, and I still believe in this is not a war between Israel and Hamas. This is a war between the West and Iran that is leading a radical ideology that has a plan to create a multi-front campaign against the state of Israel. So from here, I want to move to more fronts and how these fronts are also active, but not at the same level. Let's start from West Bank. We have seen in the past 2 years a campaign in West Bank to fight terror. It didn't start now. You all know about that. But the IDF campaign against Hamas terrorists in West Bank was intensified. And this is highly important, not only with regard to specific tactics, security issues, to catch the terrorists. It is also important with regard to the future of West Bank and how West Bank is going to look like. Because what we saw in the past decade is growing support for Hamas in West Bank. And in the past few weeks, IDF arrested around 700 Hamas terrorists in West Bank only, out of 1,000 that were arrested. Only today, there was an operation in Jenin, for example. So West Bank is not quiet as well, and there is an IDF effort to protect the settlers over there as well. So actually, Israel is fighting Hamas in Gaza, in West Bank, and also in the north. Well, in the north, it's not only Hamas, and Hamas is kind of a proxy of Hezbollah, which brings me to talk about my neighborhood, talk about the north. I'm doing this webinar today from actually my bomb shelter, which is 1.5 square meters, 9 kilometers from the border. I told you in the last webinar that I feel like I'm in a war zone, even though there are not too many alerts here, but IDF is everywhere. I met today IDF soldiers, I briefed them, and I told them that when I hear the Israeli artillery in the middle of the night, I feel safe. It's funny to say it, but when I hear the explosions and booms, but what I actually hear is the Israeli artillery. And I feel safe because I know there is somebody to push away the Hezbollah and Hamas terrorists from the fence. And I think this is the main effort of the IDF now in the northern front, especially with Lebanon, while Hezbollah is continuing to try again and again and again to carry out anti-tank launching and mortars launching, and Hamas to carry out missiles launching, and Islamic Jihad to carry out infiltration into communities. And IDF is succeeding in shooting and preventing all these tries, either a minute after it happened or 2 minutes before it happens. And that way you see almost 50 Hezbollah terrorists that were killed since this war started. The main effort of Hezbollah, which is the main player that is executing the terrorist attacks from Lebanon, is the effort to against IDF soldiers, positions, vehicles, against the Israeli surveillance and communications on the fence itself or on the wall itself, and also against our communities which are next to the border, communities that are evacuated. Yesterday, there was a direct hit in Kiryat Shmona, which is the biggest town in the north, 22,000 people that were evacuated, but a direct hit on a house. It was burned. When I interviewed international media, in many cases, I see that before they bring me online, they describe what is happening up north, and they talk about exchange of fire on the border with Lebanon. And I don't accept that. It's not exchange of fire. This is Hezbollah trying to drag Israel into war on our northern border. This is IDF trying to bring security to the people who are living here up north. It's not exchange of fire. This is an inaccurate way to describe what is actually happening here. And I think that the targets that Hezbollah picked is in order to establish its preparations for a future invasion by trying to damage the IDF capabilities on the borderline. And as I've said, with regard to the IDF, there is a success in the past 2 weeks to deal with this threat. Though again, some anti-tanks are launched, some mortars are launched. Only today was very active. We had, I think I stopped counting after 5 attacks against Israel that came from Lebanon only today. We also had 2 incidents of UAVs that succeeded to penetrate into Israel, above Akko and above Haifa. And we had a few more that IDF intercepted even before they crossed into Israel. Not to all the attacks, there is a claiming of responsibility, but there are a lot of attacks, or most of the attacks, we see a claiming of responsibility by Hezbollah. It is filming what it is doing and it is publishing it. So it's not that complicated to understand. Hezbollah controls South Lebanon. What in the past, I can say that Alma Center said that there were attacks that came from Palestinian factions in Lebanon that were not accepted by Hezbollah. This is not the situation now. Now the situation is of full collaboration between the different factions. We see this in the meetings, and we see this with the nature and the characteristics of these attacks. These are attacks that Hamas and Islamic Jihad would not carry out without cooperating and coordinating with Hezbollah. And of course, you see Hezbollah itself very active around it. Most of the Hezbollah terrorists that were killed, as I've said, around 50, almost 50, came from these anti-tank squads that are trying to launch, or mortars. Sometimes it's different kind of munitions. Most of them are coming from the towns in South Lebanon. And I want to focus for a moment on 3 of them that came from a unit in Hezbollah. The name is the Difa al-Madani. Translated to English, the Civilian Defense, which is a kind of a parallel to the Home Front Command in Israel, but it also includes ambulances and firefighters, etc. In Lebanon, there are two Difa al-Madani, two civilian defense, one of the state and one of Hezbollah. The one of Hezbollah, they are active soldiers that are actually not only dealing with civilian defense, they are also dealing with fighting. We've seen this in Syria, and we've seen this in Lebanon, and this is exactly how it's a good example. This unit is a good example how the military wing of Hezbollah is entrenched and mixed with the civilian wing, which is almost impossible to defer. What else is happening in Lebanon is that we see the political arena becoming more and more active, and we hear the different voices coming out of Lebanon. According to the diversity of Lebanon with regard to religious sects, Christians that usually, not always, but usually against Hezbollah and Sunnis, while Shiites usually, not always, usually support Hezbollah, we do see in social media the same voices according to this diversity in the Lebanese society. We had a statement today of the Lebanese Prime Minister who said that Lebanon is not interested in war. And yet, what we've seen is that yesterday, there was a statement of the Iranian president that said that Israel crossed the red line. The Iranians were very consistent in their statement, saying that if the violence in Gaza will continue, eventually more fronts will join in. And in some of the statements, they even said Hezbollah will join in. In response to this statement of the Iranian president, the head of the Lebanese parliament said he supports any action of Hezbollah if the violence in Gaza will continue. The head of the Lebanese parliament is not coming from Hezbollah. He is coming from another Shiite party named Amal that actually collaborates with Hezbollah, and they ran together in elections. It's not completely a honeymoon. A little bit of good news, I can say that we do see, that we do see a little bit of criticism coming from Hezbollah speakers in the social media against Hamas, especially against Hamas leaders that are sitting outside of Gaza and asking everybody to sacrifice themselves for this campaign, yet they are in the nice hotels in Qatar, giving the orders to everybody. So it's not exactly, complete honeymoon between the different proxies of Iran, but there is still a coordination. One of the things everybody's waiting for here is the speech of the leader of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, that sometimes, not always, but sometimes in these speeches, his speeches, we can understand where this is heading. He didn't speak until now. These were only statements that were made in the media, not himself. And he's planned to speak this Friday, and we'll see how this will develop. Meanwhile, other speakers of Hezbollah continue to send the same message. As I've said, Iran was very consistent. Hezbollah was very consistent with this message that the resistance, meaning all the factions of Iran, will get involved if the violence will continue, or the resistance will continue until the violence will stop. Okay, it's the two sides of the same idea. And while they are emphasizing, and this is very interesting, that the goal of the whole campaign was to stop any normalization process with the state of Israel. As I've said, I think it was only something that accelerated the plan to invade to Israel, but it is definitely important. Iran is working with Hezbollah on this plan of the multi-front campaign and invasion into Israel in the past decade. Normalization was not on the table back then when all of that started. Syria. I get a lot of questions about Syria. And when we talk about Syria, we talk about, thank you. I'm talking too much during the day. When we talk about Syria, since this campaign started, we had 3 times rocket launching from Syria. No organization claimed responsibility. We've seen the IDF retaliations against Iranian proxy militias in southern Syria and against Syrian army sites, since the Syrian government eventually is held responsible. In addition, we have seen attacks against the US Army, about 18 attacks in Iraq and in Syria of Iranian factions in these places against US Army sites, whether with drones or with missiles. And what the Americans are doing are responding, especially in East and in East Syria, in an area named El Mayadin. And this is also very interesting. El Mayadin is an area which is actually a border crossing between Iraq and Syria. It's the Syrian name to the area. And it became kind of an Iranian area inside Syria. This is a strategic area for the Iranians in Syria, for what we call the ground corridor, meaning the area from which the ammunition, the advanced weapons is being transferred from Iran through Iraq into Syria and maybe even to Lebanon. Israel had a campaign in the past decade and still has to attack these places. We called it the campaign between the wars. How do you create attacks against these places without deteriorating into war? This was the whole idea of the campaign between the wars and not during war. And today we saw reports that this kind of convoy of trucks that was passing in this border crossing was attacked by Americans. If this report is true, which I couldn't confirm, it is very interesting because it means the Americans are finally taking part in this campaign, understanding that these weapons that is being smuggled all the time endangers not only the state of Israel, but also the American forces in the region. The attacks against the American presence in these areas was especially in eastern Syria, some in the Kurdish areas and some in areas which are east to the Euphrates, areas where there are gas and oil fields that the Americans actually control, and also further to the south in Syria, in Tanaf. Tanaf is also a strategic area because it is actually blocking the southern route of this Iranian corridor that I've just described. Another front is the Red Sea or Yemen or both. We don't always know. We had 2 incidents of launching of drones and cruise missiles that came from this area. We are not sure whether both of them came from Yemen itself, or maybe one of them was from ships in the Red Sea, Iranian ships. Our defense minister exposed this kind of capability in the past, using civilian ships in the hands of the IRGC and capability to launch from drones from these kind of ships. It is not clear whether these were launched, against Israel or against American forces there. But the bottom line is that in the first incident, there was a full interception, maybe even the Saudis' assistance, I'm not sure. In the second incident, one drone was intercepted and the other one fell in Egypt, in Taba. By the way, not far from the border next to Eilat. To end up the briefing, and we'll move forward to Q&A, I want to end with a few insights from a very personal point of view. And I want to say a few things. I was very encouraged today by meeting the soldiers here. I saw their morale. I saw their unity. When you meet reservists, and they were reservists, you actually meet the Israeli society. which it doesn't matter where they come from, what's their political opinion, how religious are they, and what's their sect, whether they're Ashkenazi or Mizrahi or whatever. It was everybody together, very much united behind the mission of protecting me as a resident of the Galilee. And it really encouraged me in this very difficult time. On the other hand, I'll tell you a small story. As you know, I never spent a lifetime outside of Israel. English is not my mother tongue. And I read a post in Instagram today. There was a photo of the nanny of Be'eri with 2 years old, maybe less. And it was written that this picture was taken in Be'eri before the war, and none of the toddlers survived. And I never heard the word toddlers before. This is how I learned this word. So it was a very sad moment for me to see that. I think it's the photo of this war, the toddlers. From a personal point of view, one of the soldiers asked me today, what will happen when we leave? Because I kept telling them that they bring me security, that I feel safe when they are here, that I feel safe to see them, actually women soldiers, at the entrance to my town. What will happen when they will leave? And I think this is the greatest fear of us, residents of the Galilee. What will happen when they will leave? Who will protect us? We will continue to sleep with this monster because it is clear that Hamas copied the plan from Hezbollah and not vice versa. And one last thing that is extremely encouraging for me is the women's place. I must say 2 words about that as well. I served in an army that it was not always easy for a woman to be promoted and to get to higher ranks. When I received my lieutenant colonel, I was the only woman out of 40 and with reserves, which was unusual. Women are serving in reserves. And today, everywhere we go, we see women fighting shoulder to shoulder with the men, equal, getting killed, falling as hostages, rescuing lives, saving sometimes the men, and no difference. And I'm so proud of them. And they are women, they didn't deny that they are women. And when I was in the army, I didn't put makeup, I cut my hair, I wore big uniforms, wanted to hide who I am. They're not hiding. They are so beautiful and they are so brave, and I'm so proud of them. And it gives me a lot of strength to know that I'm protected by men and women together from the different parts of the Israeli society. So this is kind of a personal sense. I'll go to the Q&A. Those of you who did like this, just write the questions in the Q&A. I see tons of questions. I'll do my best to answer them. And I can't scan in English, so it will take me time to read the questions, to understand them, and then to read it for you, and then to answer them. A theory that Hezbollah didn't attack simultaneously with Hamas because they prefer to provoke. I still stand behind this. Nasrallah was equally taken by surprise. This is what Ronen Bergman is saying. I respect that there are different opinions upon experts of why exactly Hezbollah didn't join in. I don't think that it was taken by surprise because he wrote the plan. There is a video that Hezbollah published, and we published it on our social media a decade ago, that it's the same plan, okay? And to say that he was taken by surprise because of the timing, so I need an explanation. What did they talk about when all these meetings happened between mid-August to the beginning of September? I don't think it took him by surprise. I think there is a reason. I said what I think is the reason is that Hezbollah didn't want to be blamed that he initiated the war, that took Lebanon to war, that he wanted to present as if Israel initiated the war against Lebanon. Maybe I'm wrong. As I've said, there are different opinions among experts, but what I see is full coordination. Okay, I'm moving forward to the next question. There are hopes here that maybe Hezbollah hopes that we will use a lot of munitions. I think that Hezbollah already understands that Israel has enough munitions because United States promised that Israel will have enough munitions. So I don't know. Eventually, Hezbollah is reading what is happening outside of the bunker of Nasrallah, just as we are. Do you think that Iran will activate Hezbollah to open a second front? Yes, I believe so. I believe this is the plan, except I want to emphasize something here. All of us in the West looking for quick wars. We want to end this as quickly as possible. We want to go back to our regular lives. We want to send the kids to school, go back to work, and end all this nightmare. But this is not what Iran wants. For Iran, it's okay if it will take a year, 6 months, 2 years, doesn't matter. And that's why I don't know when Iran will activate Hezbollah. Maybe next month when it will be winter here up north and it will be more difficult. It will be more difficult for Hezbollah. It will be also more difficult for us. I don't know. I believe that in the Iranian plan, in the Iranian master plan, yes, it's Hezbollah, it's Hamas, it's West Bank, it's inside Israel. Whoever they can bring in, they will bring in. Okay, if there are questions that I don't answer, it's because I don't know the answer, okay? I'm not ignoring you on purpose or anything. How can we support Alma and Israel from the US? Thank you for this question, Scott. Support Alma, you can enter our website and donate. And of course, first and foremost, share the information. We publish a lot of information in our Twitter and our website, and share it with your friends, share it with everybody you know, spread the word about what is truly happening here. Our focus is the North. Our focus is more of a research, but there is tons of information that is going on in the media on other topics as well. You are welcome to share. That's one thing. Another thing to support Israel is actually to support the Jewish people. I see what is happening in the universities and it makes me sad. And I think this is your campaign, American. I don't know how many Americans we have here and how many from other countries, but I think it's the same in other countries. There is growing anti-Semitism outside of Israel. This is your campaign. It's in your homes. It is endangering you guys, and you must stand still against that and not enable it. This is unheard of, that universities are canceling events that are supporting the state of Israel because they are intimidating and they are enabling those who are executing violence to continue with their protest. This is unheard of. Effect of war on the economy, moral of the people that you are involved with. Yes, the daily lives here is paralyzed. My husband is 1 day in reserves, 1 day at work, 1 day in reserves, 1 day at work. The children are not going to school. Many owners of businesses and employees are recruited. People don't have the mood to sit in a restaurant or in a cafe. We don't want to go outside when it's dark. So there is not exactly regular life here now or routine, even though we start to talk about it. How do we create regular life? I was at the mall today. There were people at the mall. At the gym, yes, people are going to the gym. So there is kind of a constant tension between how do we preserve normality for ourselves, for the psychological point of view. And on the other hand, there are damages to economy. I cannot ignore that. And I know that it will take time to come over that. The moral, I told the soldiers today that Golda, our prime minister, once said that Israel has a secret weapon. And she didn't talk about what you all probably think about now. She said Israel has a secret weapon. Israelis don't have a choice. So we don't have a choice. That's our secret weapon. This is how we survive. I know that I'm not going to leave my hometown. I know that this is my home and this is where I live. And we don't have any alternative. And that's why we're not only going to survive this, we are going to win this, and we are going to eliminate our enemies here. There is a question here, why this Israel obsessions with international public opinion? I'll tell you why. Because eventually this public opinion influenced the policymakers. And we've seen this in previous operations. This is something that I experienced myself during my service in the army. This international pressure that eventually ends up with either a phone call from the American president who is saying to our prime minister, you're going to stop and you're going to stop now. And it doesn't matter whether we achieved our goals to defeat this monster or not. Or there is a UN resolution that says, Israel, you should stop and you should stop now. So public opinion eventually influenced the leaders, which eventually imposed ceasefire on us, and ceasefire that is not in the terms that we need. We need to defeat this monster because we can no longer live with that. And the reason that this monster grew the way it grew, part of the reason, not all of the reason, part of the reason is because we surrendered to this international pressure, and we understood the cost of war and the cost of preemptive attacks, if you like, and the cost of international pressure and the cost of delegitimate of the state of Israel. And we prefer to maintain and to contain and to live with that. And we put it at great risk, the people that were living on our borders. Okay, I don't want to get into tactical questions of how exactly IDF should operate. It's kind of my moral code. I don't think that for us, all of us who are sitting next to the keyboard, the computer, on our comfortable couches in the office, neither do I, and none of us is in the position to tell the IDF whether to attack like this or like that, or from this place or from another. We don't have the full picture. We don't have the full intelligence picture, and we don't have the full operational picture. So I'm trying to avoid that. So excuse me if I'm not answering these kind of questions. Might the Lebanese use this time to attack Hezbollah and free themselves? I'm not sure they're capable of that. Hezbollah is the strongest player in Lebanon. It is the strongest militia. It's semi-army in Lebanon. It is stronger than the Lebanese army itself. And I'm not sure the Lebanese are capable of that anymore, even though I believe that many of them wish that we will do that for them. Do I agree of the assessment that Hezbollah has between 150,000 or 250,000 rockets? Yes. You can find that on our Twitter and our website, the numbers, and we are now working to update our visuals according to what the IDF just published. We're talking about 140,000 mortars, which are for a range of about 20 kilometers, 65,000 missiles that are for a range of between 20 to 80 of the sword, okay, around, and around 5,000 more, which are for what we call medium range, up to 200 kilometers around Jerusalem. We're talking about thousands to long range, south to Jerusalem. We are talking about hundreds that are advanced technology, precision guided missiles, cruise missiles, and surface to sea missiles, surface to air missiles. We're talking around 2,000 drones, which their range can reach to different ranges, up to 2,000 kilometers, very accurate. That's the arsenal, that's the missiles and drones and artillery arsenal of Hezbollah that is threatening us. Is the fact that Hamas had put out the cameras along the Lebanese border, it's not Hamas, it's Hezbollah that is trying to destroy this camera. Is it an indication that they are planning an attack? I think yes, it is. The fact that Hezbollah picked its targets on the Israeli-Lebanese border as targets that are actually meant to damage our capabilities of surveillance, to damage our presence on the borderline, definitely can be an evidence that they are planning an invasion. But again, I don't know exactly when. I don't know whether these cameras were replaced. What I think is that they are replaced in different capabilities. They are replaced in the fact that now we have full deployment of soldiers over here that can face and deal with future invasion, either while they see it with various different other measures, not necessarily cameras on the fence, and they can fight that with various capabilities within the hands of these soldiers. And we see the results every day, as I've said. What is the possibility that Hezbollah and its fighters will cross into Israel and accomplish what Hamas did in October 7th? As long as the IDF is deployed the way it is now, the possibility is low. So it's about statistics, okay? If they send thousands, maybe few will cross and create damage somewhere along the border. Personally, I'm worried about this option, but it's not the results of October 7th. Definitely not. If this campaign will end while Hezbollah reserve its capabilities, we may see October 7th again. And I don't sleep at night because I'm worried about it. I want to say there are a lot of questions here about Hezbollah provocations, the tactical attacks of Hezbollah. So, as I've said, there are different opinions in Israel about what Nasrallah truly wants. Maybe we'll find out this Friday, I don't know. But some are saying these are provocations, and the mission of Nasrallah now is to keep the border active and no more than that. Provocations, if you like, okay? Or make sure that part of the IDF is here and not in Gaza. I think it's more than that. I think that, again, since I look at the past year and I look at the behavior of Hezbollah in the past year, and I look at the targets that Hezbollah picked, and I look at the plan itself that, as I've said, was Hezbollah plan, but at some point on time that we don't know exactly when, the decision was made that Hamas will execute this plan. I believe that there is the same plan still exists in the north, and I believe Hezbollah is making the preparation to execute it, but I don't know exactly when. And yes, meanwhile, these are preparations to attack cameras, to attack antennas. These are preparations. Is the Lebanese border completely sealed? Okay, it's the same question in different version, but just to say, there is no border in the world that is completely sealed. Okay, there is no physical barrier that can prevent an invasion. There is preparedness. Is the IDF prepared for a Hezbollah infiltration and invasion? The answer is yes. Did the IDF succeeded until now to prevent infiltration of terrorists into Israel? Yes, it happened few times since this war started. They tried, they killed IDF soldiers twice, 3 soldiers were killed, but they didn't succeed in killing civilians. We had 1 worker that was killed by anti-tank attack. We had civilian wounded in one of the attacks against one of the communities. But with infiltrations, they failed. Basically, they failed in, killing people massively. And most of the, as I've said, most of these communities are almost empty. Only the farmers that cannot leave, the fields and the orchards and the cows and the chickens. And the soldiers are in these communities, no women and children. There is a very good question here about deterrence. Whether the war in Gaza create deterrence to Hezbollah. I would even expand the question, whether the US carrier create deterrence to Iran. What can actually deter? Telling you the truth, again, and I am a lonely voice here in this. I don't believe in deterrence anymore. Maybe I'm not being professional enough. Eventually I live here. It's my life at stake. Deterrence is a Western point of view. How can you deter someone that doesn't care about the cost of life? How can you deter someone who made up his mind? I am prepared enough to reach my goal. How can you deter someone who says, it's not me. I'm using proxies, Iraqis, Syrians, Lebanese, Yemenis, Gazians, Palestinians. It's not me. I'm not threatened. Nobody's talking about attacking Tehran now. Nobody attacked Moscow. No Americans, I'll put it this way, attacked Moscow for Ukraine. What is this deterrence? I think for us in the West is very difficult to understand when exactly our enemy is deterred. And I don't want to jump into conclusions that Hezbollah sees what is happening in Gaza and it is deterred. Iran sees the US carrier and it is deterred. I'm not sure. I need proofs to say, yes, it is deterred. And I don't have any proofs until now. Is Israel's objective in Gaza to also eliminate Islamic Jihad? The answer is yes. It's part of the goals of this war, as I've mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. How things in Rajar? Just to make sure everybody understand, Rajar is a small town of Alawites that is on the Israeli-Lebanese border. Due to the UN, half of it is in Lebanon, half of it is in Israel. It was actually taken from Syria in 1967 with the Golan. All the people of Rajar are loyal Israelis until now. They are loyal citizens for the state of Israel. And Rajar is open for visitors, except for now, supposed to be evacuated. I'm not sure that all the people of Rajar were evacuated. Maybe it's something that I can check. But they definitely support all these efforts of the IDF. Threat of ISIS Sinai is a constant threat. It's not didn't begin in this war and didn't end in this war. It's something that the Egyptians and us are coping with every day. There are questions about Rajar and actually about the communities which are next to the border. Are they completely sealed? No, they are not completely sealed, but I don't recommend anybody to go there because it's too dangerous. That's it. There are IDF blockades in the region. I cannot comment when the IDF will actually enable you to pass or not, but they are not completely sealed. And I'm not going there. I used to be on the border every day. I'm not going there now anymore. But I know that some reporters did. Doesn't every Israeli town have 24/7 civil guards to watch for them? Today, yes. In Israel, in the communities next to the border, we did have what we call a quick reaction force that is based on the people that are living in the community. They get the guns from the army. They are trained by the army, by the IDF. But the problem, for example, in Gaza, is that they didn't have their guns in their homes. At some point of time, the decision was made to take the guns from their homes and to put them in a warehouse for the guns. And many of them didn't have enough time during the invasion to take the guns and fight the Hamas. In one of the communities, for example, that the head of security gave the guns on time and activate this quick reaction force on time, the terrorists didn't enter this community and it was rescued. Nobody was killed there. Now in the north, there are quick reaction forces everywhere, including in my community, but also soldiers. I don't know whether IDF will attack Hezbollah, and I want to say something around it. I don't know what to wish for, because we know that if there will be war with Hezbollah, the firepower of Hezbollah that I've just described is of 10 times more than the firepower of Hamas. We'll have around 4,000 rockets that will be launched from Lebanon to Israel every day. That's a huge amount. I already described the accurate PGMs, precision-guided missiles. So the damage is going to be very big on both sides. I cannot wish for war. But on the other hand, as I've said, if this will end while Hezbollah preserves its capabilities, there's going to be another October 7th, and I'm very worried about that. So I don't know. How do we hold up? We hold up. We try to be busy. That's the best way. I'll try to take one last question. What's the biggest threat to the north? Why did they evacuate that many people? The biggest, there are two threats when we speak about the north, is the array of the missiles and drones and the ground invasion. As I've said, same plan exactly of Hamas. The reason they evacuated that many people is that the IDF will be capable of fighting this invasion without worrying about crossfire of civilians, meaning creating a kill zone if needed, in the Israeli side of the border, and kill the terrorists before they get to the communities that were not evacuated. To understand what I've just said, you need to imagine the borderline. The communities are at the border. This is meters between kindergartens and Lebanon, between homes and Lebanon, between amusement park for the children and Lebanon, meters away. And it is impossible to protect civilians if there is an invasion while they are living meters away. The only way is to evacuate them, to create an area which is no civilians, and that way you can walk freely against these terrorists and push them back quickly enough into Lebanon. I'll end up with that. I know there are tons of questions more. I did my best to answer as many as possible. You're uninvited to send us emails. Best way to get my answers is WhatsApp. And then I send you a recording back with my answers. Spread the word, support us, and do what you have to do in your countries to stop the anti-Semitism there. I know it's also a huge problem. So stay safe, everybody, and thank you for joining me.